Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. As you all know, the President is currently undergoing his routine and long-scheduled physical at Walter Reed Medical Center, and we will have a readout from the White House physician. Last night, Karoline arrived back safely in the United States after being detained in Russia for more than a year. Since Inauguration Day, President Trump and his team have secured the release of more than 40 detained Americans abroad. This is more than half of the number of Americans released by Joe Biden in 4 years, and President Trump has brought these Americans home in 80 days. This administration will continue to work hard to bring Americans home from around the world. As I've said before, and I will say it again today, everybody in this room has access to the most transparent and accessible president in American history. The cabinet meeting yesterday was further proof. President Trump asked each secretary to provide an update to all of you in the media on the critical work they are doing at their respective agencies to deliver on his agenda. And according to new reporting from the Washington Times, who I believe is in this room today, President Trump answered nearly 100 questions from the press, all of you, during his first 3 open press cabinet meetings this year. That's nearly 20 times the number answered by Joe Biden in cabinet meetings during his entire 4 years in office. In more excellent economic news that was released yesterday, the Consumer Price Index report showed inflation fell to 2.4% in March, smashing expectations for the second straight month in a row. This marked the first drop in consumer prices dating all the way back to the COVID pandemic. Prescription drug prices saw the largest monthly decline on record. Prices for airfare, used vehicles, and car insurance all decreased as well. And energy prices fell 2.4% in March, driven by plummeting gas prices around the country. Also yesterday, House Republicans answered President Trump's call to move forward the budget resolution and officially set the stage for the passage of one big, beautiful bill. The American economy will boom after this bill is passed and the rest of the president's pro-growth agenda goes into effect. The largest tax cuts and deregulation in history, coupled with our energy industry unleashed and renegotiated trade agreements that put America first, are the ultimate formula to usher in the golden age of America. On that note, more than 75 countries have now reached out to the Trump administration, eager to address the trade issues that have exploited America and hurt our workers in the process. The phones have been ringing off the hook to make deals, and these countries wisely heeded President Trump's warning not to retaliate, and as a result, they were rewarded with a 90-day pause and substantially lower reciprocal tariff rates during this period so potential solutions can be achieved. Past presidents just willingly accepted the failed status quo on trade that ripped off our workers and our companies. But that's not who this president is. He creates his own leverage and negotiates deals better than anyone else who has sat in the Oval Office before him. And that process is currently underway. On another matter, the deadline for registration under the Alien Registration Act is today. All foreign nationals present in the United States longer than 30 days must register with the federal government. Failure to comply with this is a crime, punishable by fines, imprisonment, or both. As President Trump and Secretary Noem have both said, if you register and you leave now, you choose to self-deport, you may have the opportunity to return later legally. But if not, you will be arrested, fined, deported, never to return to our country again. The Trump administration will continue to enforce our nation's immigration laws. We will not pick and choose which laws to enforce. We must know who is in our country for the safety and the security of our homeland and for all American citizens. I also have a note from the First Lady to share with you on this Friday. On Tuesday this week, First Lady Melania Trump celebrated the advancement of the Take It Down Act in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. The important legislation passed the committee with bipartisan support, and as you may remember, the President talked about this bill in his address to a joint session of Congress last month. The First Lady remains dedicated to her championing child well-being, ensuring that every young person can thrive, and, of course, championing her Be Best agenda. We urge Congress to swiftly pass this important legislation. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jordan Berman. Jordan is a social media content creator and influencer and a lawyer who grew up following breaking down the news from a neutral perspective. Jordan is the host of her own podcast called Unbiased Politics, where she dissects the top stories from the week from a legal perspective. Jordan focuses on bringing back real journalism from a nonpartisan perspective and has mastered explaining complex legal decisions to a mass audience in the short-form context. Her two biggest platforms are TikTok and Instagram, where she has roughly 500,000 followers on each. With that, please kick us off, Jordan.
Thank you. As you know, yesterday the House passed the SAVE Act, and many married women, soon-to-be married women, are concerned that the new voter ID requirements may inhibit their access to the polls. What assurances can you give women voters in America to ease their concerns?
Sure. Well, the SAVE Act, as you mentioned, was passed by the House yesterday. This is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. I believe I'm getting that correct. And this act is a common sense measure. It would require proof of citizenship for voting in our elections. The Democrats have been fear-mongering about this bill, have been saying that married women, if their name has changed, they didn't change it on their identification, would not be able to vote. That is complete fallacy. There are outlined in the bill about how to avoid that. The president very much supports a common sense solution to ensuring that only citizens can engage in our elections. This is critical to improving the integrity of our elections and also the trust that American citizens need to have in our electoral process. So the president supports this bill, and that is a myth that has been proven wrong by the text of this bill. And I believe some of the co-sponsors of the bill have been very vocal in addressing that. And certainly I myself, as a married woman, would not stand before this podium if the president did not support such a common sense measure.
Thank you. For my next question, I actually want to give a voice to the American people. I sourced a question from one of my listeners. Her name is Bryn. She is from Oregon. And she asked, what, if any, plans do you have, the administration, for the money that will be generated by tariffs imposed on foreign goods? How will the administration facilitate the development of American industries when many critical components, labor, parts, etc., are much cheaper and more feasible from foreign entities?
It's a great question from your listener, and I want to thank her for submitting it to you to ask. That's the part of the new media seat, is so that everyday Americans across the country have a voice in this room. So thank you again for being here. Thanks for the question. The president's point about his trade and tariff agenda is to bolster our manufacturing industries here in our country, to bring down the cost of living here in our country, and to ensure that we are maintaining critical supply chains here in America. We cannot be dependent on countries like China if we want this country to be strong and wealthy. So the president wants to restore wealth to America by shoring up these jobs here at home, which will result in good paying jobs and higher wages for the American public. And so Americans should trust in that process. He effectively implemented tariffs in his first term while driving down the cost of living in this country, and that's what he's focused on doing again. Thank you.
As a follow-up question, could I just ask, are there any specific ideas that the administration has as to what that revenue, specific tariff revenue, will be used for?
Yes, to the heart of your question, the president has spoke about the trillions of dollars that he expects in revenue from tariffs and how we can use it to pay down our debt and to ensure that we are no longer faced with a crippling national debt in the trillions that is going to bankrupt our nation for future generations. So that money coming back home will make America in the green rather than in the red, which any small business owner across the country, I believe, can appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kelly.
Hey. Tomorrow there will be negotiations between the United States and Iran in Oman. What are the president's chief goals for that, and is he satisfied with how Iran is responding to this? They don't want direct face-to-face negotiations, instead sort of old-school shuttle diplomacy where they're in separate rooms and messages are passed back and forth. So is the president comfortable with the arrangement there, and what is the chief objective?
Well, I have spoken to both the president and also his national security team who will be engaged in these discussions. These will be direct talks with the Iranians, and I want to make that very clear. I also spoke to the president just last night about his goal when it comes to Iran, and he has reiterated repeatedly to all of you publicly and also privately to his team here at the White House, his ultimate goal and the ultimate objective is to ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. The president believes in diplomacy, direct talks, talking directly in the same room in order to achieve that goal. But he's made it very clear to the Iranians, and his national security team will as well, that all options are on the table, and Iran has a choice to make. You can agree to President Trump's demand, or there will be all hell to pay. And that's how the president feels. He feels very strongly about it.
And can you update us on Mr. Witkoff in Russia and what's happening with direct communications with Vladimir Putin?
I can confirm that Mr. Witkoff is in Russia to have direct communications with the Kremlin and with Vladimir Putin. This is another step in the negotiating process towards a ceasefire and an ultimate peace deal in Russia and Ukraine. As these negotiations are ongoing, I obviously will not get ahead of the president or his team, but I think the president has been quite clear that he's been continually frustrated with both sides of this conflict, and he wants to see this fighting end. He wants the war to end. We believe we have leverage in negotiating a deal, to a peace deal, and we're going to use that leverage, and the president is determined to see this through. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Caroline. President Trump has said China wants to make a deal on tariffs. The president says he has a great relationship with Chinese President Xi. He's willing to speak with him directly. Why doesn't the president just pick up the phone and get this ball going?
All of the things the president just said are true. The president, as I said from the podium just a few days ago when I was up here, would be gracious if China intends to make a deal with the United States. If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China. The United States of America is the strongest, best economy in the world, as evidenced by the more than 75 countries who have called the administration immediately to cut good deals. So the president wants to do what's right for the American people. He wants to see fair trade practices around the globe, and that's his intention and his goal.
So is he waiting for China to make the first move here?
I'm not going to comment on communications that are happening or may not be happening, or either way. We'll leave it to our national security team to get these discussions underway. And as always, in the effort of transparency, we will provide updates moving forward. But the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal? If they're not talking, where's that optimism come from?
He's optimistic.
Hey,
Sean.
why would any of our allies work with us to isolate China in a trade war if we're treating friend and foe alike?
You'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it very clear they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base. You saw Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office with the president saying that he was going to bring down all of their monetary tariffs and their non-monetary tariff trade barriers as well. We've heard from South Korea. We've heard from Japan. The president has spoken to Vietnam. We have Italy coming to the White House next week. There's a reason for that, Sean, and it's because they need the United States of America and our business model and our markets to survive, and the president is using that leverage to our advantage. Michael.
Hey, thank you, Caroline. Two-part question on China. Beijing says it will simply ignore any further tariff escalations from the U.S. Does President Trump see this as China backing down? And as a follow-up to that, what do you say to people like Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary who say, you guys simply haven't tariffed China enough?
Look, the tariff rate on China remains where it was yesterday, at the 145% level. The president made it very clear when the United States is punched, he will punch back harder. And he hopes to make a deal that benefits the American worker and our companies that have been ripped off for far too long. And he's finally taking bold and courageous action to do that. You know, taking on China is, in the terms of trade and tariffs, is something that both Democrats and Republicans alike have spoken about for decades. President Trump is finally doing it.
Caroline, real quick, the president of El Salvador is coming to the White House on Monday. Does President Trump want him to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia with him?
The Supreme Court made their ruling last night very clear that it's the administration's responsibility to facilitate the return, not to effectuate the return. I believe the Department of Justice just filed another brief in the lower court. I would defer you to that for any updates. But as you mentioned, President Bukele will be here at the White House on Monday to talk about the cooperation that is at an all-time high. And we very much appreciate President Bukele and El Salvador's cooperation and the repatriation of El Salvadorian gang members who the previous administration allowed to infiltrate our country. Sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline. The president spoke quite highly of the great relationship that he has with the Turkish president. We know that the president might be heading off to the Middle East very soon. Is he planning to meet with the Turkish president, either here in the White House or in Turkey? Any plans?
I don't have any details about the president's overseas trip other than to say he was surely going to Saudi Arabia. There could be more countries as part of that trip. We're working on the details, and as I've said repeatedly, we will provide the details of that trip as soon as possible.
A trip to Turkey, or his invitation to the Turkish president, is under consideration?
I'm not going to comment on the details of the trip, but once they're confirmed, I will certainly let you all know. Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to ask you about presidential health and also about tariffs. On presidential health, are there plans for the president's physician to come here and take our questions? And also, President Trump repeatedly makes remarks about the former president's health. Is he considering using his executive powers to bring any greater transparency there?
As I have said, the president is undergoing his long-scheduled physical. It's a yearly physical that every president receives, and we will provide an update on that by the president's physician as soon as we possibly can.
And about the former president and transparency regarding his health, are there...
Well, I can tell you there was certainly a lack of transparency from the former president, from the entire former administration, and frankly, a lot of people in this room when it came to the health and the competence of the former president of the United States, Joe Biden. There was one of the greatest cover-ups and frankly political scandals this nation has ever seen. It's been unraveled in some recent books that are being written by journalists who engaged in that cover-up and scandal, which is quite ironic. But this president is clearly committed to transparency. You in this room see him and hear from him on a daily basis. You in this room know from covering him, it's hard to keep up with him. He is a machine working around the clock every single day. And the physician, after today's physical, will provide an update on the report in the effort of transparency.
If I could ask about tariffs, there have been big swings this week in the Treasury bond yields. There's a theory that it might be because of China dumping these as leverage, driving up costs for U.S. loans like mortgages. Does the White House have evidence that this is in fact a result of Chinese dumping, and if so, is there a message on that?
Not to my knowledge, but I would check in with the Treasury Department on that. I can tell you, I know our Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, is keeping a very close eye on the bond market. He spoke about it at the White House this week, and I know he's keeping his eyes on it day to day. Ed.
Thanks. Thank you, Karoline. So the administration, I have an administration source who's telling me that we're weeks away from the first deal with the country over tariffs. Where is the administration? How soon can we see that? And what country is that first one?
I won't reveal or get ahead of our trade team as these negotiations are obviously ongoing, but I can tell you very good progress has been made. Jameson Greer was on television this morning and I spoke to him, and he confirmed that more than 15 offers are already on the table, which is remarkable in just a mere matter of days. And as I said earlier, we've heard from more than 75 countries around the world. This is a team effort. The president has a team of great, brilliant advisors who have been with him every step of the way, and all of them will be divvying up the workload. And I just want to give the president and his trade team credit for taking this on. This is a massive undertaking. There's no doubt about it. We take it very seriously. The president is determined to renegotiate global trade on behalf of American workers. And again, you've seen people on both sides of the aisles calling for this for years, but I think no other president lacked the courage or maybe the work ethic or the stamina to take on such a task. And I know there were some questions about the president's delayed departure earlier to Walter Reed. I'd like to address it was because he's working on this very issue, so he was running a bit behind this morning.
On the 90-day pause, what would the president need to see in order to extend that 90-day pause for countries on tariffs?
Well, I think the president addressed this yesterday when he said he's hoping that there will be good deals made before the 90 days is up, and we will cut those deals as soon as we possibly can, country by country, tailor-made deals for each and every country as they all propose unique challenges and unique assets to each country, advantages rather, and when that 90-day mark hits, the president will make that decision then.
One more, if I could, on a different subject. So a bird earlier attacked my colleague, Peter Doocy, during a live shot at
I'm
the
wondering
White
if
House.
that's why Peter is absent from his seat. Is he doing okay?
He's recovering.
Has anyone checked on him?
He's recovering. Is anyone looking into that incident?
I could check in with GSA to see if anybody here is looking into it. I also understand there was a mouse in the briefing room earlier today, so I'm hoping somebody checked in on that, as I'm hoping it doesn't run up here and distract me. That would be a good way for all of you to distract me, actually, have a mouse come run up here. So I'll get an answer for you on that, out of respect for our good friend Peter. Jeff?
Why is American consumer confidence so low?
Look, I think there's a great optimism in this economy, great optimism for the American people, a lot of reason for people to feel optimistic. The president is, as I just said, trying to renegotiate the global trade agenda that has ripped off the American people for far too long. As he said, this is going to be a period of transition. He wants consumers to trust in him, and they should trust in him. Look at what he did in his first term. And I just want to reiterate all of the reasons to be confident since you asked, Jeff. For those watching at home, yesterday the CPI report, inflation declined massively. Consumer prices are dropping for the first time in years. Energy prices are down. In fact, oil prices are down 20% since this president took office. Wholesale prices fell again. There have been trillions of dollars in investments into this country. Every day the president is signing executive orders to cut regulation, especially when it comes to Environmental Protection Agency, our energy industry. That's going to unleash the economic boom in this country that we saw in the president's first term. So trust in President Trump. He knows what he's doing. This is a proven economic formula.
What is he asking of Americans at this time? He talked about transition costs, transition problems. Is he asking something specific for Americans to do?
No, I think the president is asking for Americans trust in Trump, as I just said, trust in his economic agenda and formula. It's a proven formula that works. And by the way, clearly the American people do in fact trust him because they did just overwhelmingly elect him to this office. Jennifer.
Is he going, I'm asking about the physical, is he undergoing any general anesthesia, and can you outline any of the other tests that he's doing today?
He is not. He is undergoing quite a few tests, imaging. Again, it's a it's a yearly physical, so there's quite a lot that goes into it to make sure the president is accomplishing all of his goals, and we will provide a readout of that as soon as we can.
And will you be committed to releasing all of the results, as many of the results as possible?
Of course, yes. The president's physician will do that. I spoke with him this morning.
Sure. Will you guys also consider releasing the president's fitness plan? He actually looks healthier than ever before. Healthier than he did 8 years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room could agree. Is he working out with Bobby Kennedy? And is he eating less McDonald's?
I can confirm the president is in very good shape, as you see on a near daily basis here. And in that vein, thank God it's Friday. It's been a very long and busy week here at the White House. We will see you all on Monday, and we will release the results of that report as soon as we can. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great week.